Welcome back to the Talking Hedge. I'm Josh Kincaid, Capital Markets Analyst and host of your Cannabis Business Podcast. Today, we're going to talk about which brands are connecting with Canadian cannabis consumers. A report from Brightfield Group. To help us do that is Katrina Glogowski, angel investor and attorney. Katrina, thanks for being back with us.
Hello, Josh.
So first off, taking a look at the differentiation, drawing in specific consumer personas. So Brightfield Group, they've conducted a segment of the market and they've identified groups of consumers thinking about and using cannabis in different ways and different things about cannabis experience. And so they have a quarterly syndicated survey as well, asking a bunch of people a lot of things. And some of those is what products do they use and why?
I want to say something coming out of the gate about this. 2 thumbs up to Brightfield Group for the names of their categories. Typical stoner, stressed out millennial, microdosing mamas, and newbies. Whoever came up with those categories should get a raise. Just that's all I have to say about that right now, Josh.
So I'm not a big fan of the word stoner. So I would say typical cannabis consumer. I think stoner still has like a negative stereotype, whatever. But yeah, they've done a good job about putting these into 4 categories here. And so with Afria, they've kind of labeled that as a budget-friendly price with a commitment to quality and strong hooks for the typical cannabis user, with fun, colorful brand imagery helping to appeal to millennials. You know, being from Washington, that sounds irresponsible and almost illegal, having bright shapes and fancy colors.
Well, I don't know if they're talking about their packaging or their product. As we know, you can't have appealing colors and shapes, for example, for gummies. And packaging also, no cartoons, no animals, these types of things, all designed to stop the appeal to youth. So without seeing an actual example of the color brand imagery that they're talking about, it's hard to say. But I agree, it's dangerous. And once you globalize the cannabis market, we've talked before, Josh, about making sure that your brand identity is compliant. So we'll see.
Yeah, I was being semi-facetious there with the colors and shapes, because how do you get away with that? Um,
Yeah.
but so that's kind of the profile for Afria. Taking a look at Tilray's profile. Well, first off, let's go back to Afria because I don't think we gave the percentages. 46% of the people were typical cannabis users. And then stressed out millennials, they account for 40% of Afria's consumer base. The microdosing soccer moms, 17%, or 1 out of 5 people that go to Afria are microdosing soccer moms. And then newbies are about 16%. So very similar numbers to Tilray as well. Newbies 48, typical cannabis user 37, stressed out millennial 35, and microdosing mamas 27. And the typical person using Tilray is probably going to go there for their pre-rolls, disposable vapes, access to new types of cannabis with simple imagery. So people who want maybe just black and white, no brands.
Yeah, well, that would be certainly a more compliant packaging. But that's interesting. I wouldn't have thought that the microdosing mamas would have gone for pre-rolls and disposable vapes over the edibles. So that's interesting. That's a very interesting statistic.
Yeah, not too surprised that newbies would go after Tilray. Tilray, we talked a lot about Brandon Kennedy not really knowing anything about the cannabis industry, and Tilray not really knowing what they're doing. So not too surprised that newbies are running after Tilray for pre-rolls, which have a very low price point. So not all
Mhm.
that surprising there.
Yeah.
Looking at Aurora, microdosing mamas, they love Aurora at 33%, followed by the typical cannabis user, then the stressed out millennial at 28%, and newbies at 21%. They like premium flower over at Aurora and high CBD strains with an uplifting message like awakening and live in the now. So that, yeah, I mean, that kind of probably screams microdosing soccer moms.
That's really interesting because Aurora has really focused on being a medical type cannabis product, focusing on the benefits of cannabis, and really not saying, hey, get high and watch some TV. They're like, hey, do this and you'll feel better. And so that sort of works with the statistics of who's buying Aurora.
Yeah, absolutely. So again, just kind of wrapping this section up with Aphria being kind of the typical cannabis consumer, Tilray being newbies, and Aurora being your microdosing soccer mom.
Very interesting.
Budgets are on the rise, though. Speaking of pre-rolls, you have value price flower and budget brands from major LPs beginning to gain traction as a competitor to the illicit market and approachable products for budget-conscious consumers. These products tend to attract millennial men, a slightly more ethnically diverse group of purchasers than average. Not surprising, they also over-index among the typical cannabis user persona. So typical cannabis users are heavy cannabis users with 88% at least 5 days a week, primarily vape and flower users. Over 51% of Canadian typical cannabis consumers report purchasing from a friend or informal dealer. And LPs will look at these budget brands as a way to convert heavy users with comparable pricing and quality, which is great because I probably go through maybe 3 pounds a year of flower that I use for edibles and joints and blunts. So I'm spending $500 a pound, so $35 an ounce. So that's budget to me because I'm a high user. I'm 7 days a week over here.
51% are still getting it from the illicit market, though. That is a huge number. Now, I do know they allow home grow, so we'll have to think about that. And buying from a friend who's legally growing it, I think that might have skewed that statistic a little bit there, Josh.
So I'm not surprised, though, that Canada has such a high illicit market. I would think a place like Alaska and California, anywhere who knows how to grow and can grow really, really well, is not going to go to a rec shop and spend more money than they normally would for an inferior product.
Agreed.
That's why the illicit market still reigns supreme in those markets.
Agreed.
But they are trying to penetrate the market with some of these products. And so some of the persona penetration, looking at brands that have successfully expanded their awareness and market share in the segment, are just going to reach a broader consumer base beyond the typical cannabis user. We're starting to see the beginnings of that from Canopy. So these brands have strong shares for stressed out millennials is a call to action for differentiated messaging, designing intentionally to resonate with specific consumer segments beyond the low hanging fruit and thus resonating with the larger market share. So looks like with Canopy, they're having a typical cannabis consumer at 46% versus Hexo at 58%. And then both followed by stressed out millennials at 40 and 31% respectively. Microdosing mamas, they like Canopy a little bit more than Hexo. And so, yeah, it's kind of interesting looking at who likes what.
That is. This is fascinating data. Really, this is great.
So to wrap up between the persona penetration, looks like Tilray, they're getting 75% from the typical cannabis consumer, probably with that low price item, followed by stressed out millennials, microdosing mamas, and newbies. So if you're from Canada, let us know where you're from. Let us know what you're buying, how much you're buying. Definitely leave some comments. With that, I think we're going to roll this one up. I want to thank Katrina Glogowski, angel investor and attorney. Thanks for being back on the podcast.
Thanks, Josh.
With that, we're going to roll this one up. I'm Josh Kincaid. This is the Talking Hedge. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, or don't, and I'm out. Don't forget to smash that like button on your way out and check out these other videos that we've got.